Hello there, fellow Synthwaver. It is time for sound design.
Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Julian here from synthwavepro.com. Thank you so much for joining me. And in this Synthwave tutorial, let's deep dive into some sound design. All right, so this is the patch we will be synthesizing from scratch. Very versatile, and I'll play it in context. So you get the picture. I think it's a nice, wonderful, versatile synth patch that you guys can use for your own productions. So we'll be doing this in Serum. If you are using another synth like Diva or Massive or, Silent, you can follow along because it's all rudimentary and very fundamental. So let's get started here. Let me go ahead and create another channel here. And this will be a MIDI channel. Let's go ahead and call this Stabs Tutoriale. Let's go ahead and color this, I don't know, purple. And I am actually going to use the data here from our initial stab and bring it down to this level right over here and color code this. Let's bring in a copy of Serum. And I am going to lower the volume. Now, the first thing I like to do here, because I'm on an older system here, I have an iMac that dates back to, 2013 here, and it's still running fairly well. I want to adjust my quality here. So I'm leaving it at 2. It's not necessarily the highest quality, but it's fairly good. I also want to reduce the polyphony of our patch here. So go ahead and set this to 6. And I am also going to have a first look at the init or initialized preset here. It's nothing special. This is what it sounds like. So let me disable the original patch here and let's have a close listen. Very simple, very basic. All right, nothing too special. So we have our work cut out for us. So the first thing I want to do here is turn our attention to our waveforms here. Let's go ahead and click on the analog here, select basic shapes, and let's move this on over from the sine wave to a saw. All right. Sounds like our init patch. It's the same waveform. So the first thing I want to do here is bump up the unison to 2 and adjust the detune because right now it sounds unusable. Let's go ahead and reduce that. Okay, so 0.03, that's more than enough. Okay, and let's keep this moving. Your most basic synthesizer is basically comprised of an oscillator, a filter, and an amp. Okay, this one has a lot more controls. We have some LFOs, some envelopes. We have another oscillator here as well as a noise generator. So we'll be tackling all of these things as we move forward. The next thing I want to do is lob over this signal to the filter, so that's where it's being routed to, and we do that by engaging the filter parameter here. And I'm going to leave this at the low pass filter here. Set the slope to 12. You have a few options, 24, 18. I like it at 12 because it allows a little more higher frequency content to seep through, and that's exactly what we want. This particular signal will be going through our filter here as we have oscillator A engaged. So let's play what we have so far, nothing special. It's a nice warm analog sound though, and I think I want to sort of exploit that a little more. So let's go ahead and use some of these controls here. Now the cool thing with Serum is that we're able to take advantage of this module here. So what I want to do is add some drive, some thickness to the sound, and we'll do that by bumping up the drive, bumping up the fatness. Now watch our master here. Okay, we don't want to clip, so I'm just going to click on this mix knob here, and all of a sudden it turns into a volume control. I'm going to scale this back, all right? Let's play that again. Let's see if I can thicken it up even more, boosting the fat parameter here. Let me crank this up even more so we can hear what it's doing. good. So we have this nice sort of thickness to the sound. And just remember, if you are going to drive this signal by using the drive and the fatness control, you definitely want to toggle from mix to the level here. Okay, and then you can sort of compensate for the volume boost that you've just incurred. All right, so let's keep it moving. It's not quite where we want it to be. Let's turn our attention to the envelope controls here. By default, envelope 1 is always tethered to the amp or the volume control of the synth. In this case, I want envelope 2, and I'm going to link this to our cutoff filter. Now, if ever you do this and you have something that looks like this, which is bidirectional, you can always click on the options and shift commands and toggle between unidirectional and bidirectional. For this tutorial, I actually want this cutoff to be set to unidirectional, and I want to bring this down to roughly about 11. All right, I know it's 11 hertz only because I've done this so many times. All right, you're not really hearing anything right now other than the filter getting louder because I've just made the adjustment here, but that's not going to cut it. So we need to adjust the envelope specifically by using the ADSR, attack, decay, sustain, release. So let's go ahead and tweak this out and we can come up with a sound that sounds really, really cool. I'm going to bump up the attack here. And there we have it sort of swelling into the sound. It's exactly what we want. But we're not done, so let's keep going. The next thing I want to do is adjust the decay of our sound and the sustain. Already sounding much better. All right, let's leave this around here. We still have some work to do, but for now we can leave the decay and sustain where they are. The release, I'll leave exactly at 15 milliseconds. All right, so if ever you get confused with the attack, decay, sustain, release, just remember that the attack, the decay, and the release are dealing in the time domain, which is why the unit of measurement is in milliseconds. So our attack is at 61 milliseconds, our decay is at 1 second, and the release 15 milliseconds, okay? Alternatively, the sustain control here is a little different in that it sets the level. So when the envelope is set to a level or the volume control, the sustain is basically there to set the volume of the signal once a note is being held, once that note is pressed, right? Similarly, if I tether it to our filter, which is what we've done here, the sustain or the envelope sustain will control the brightness of the signal because we have this filter set up here. Okay, I'll give you a quick example here. So there is a sharp rise in the level of the signal in terms of dark to bright. And when the note is being held, this is what it sounds like. If I want that note to be brighter, I will increase the sustain. There you go. And if I want that note to be darker, I lower it. I'm still holding the note down on my keyboard, okay? So this is the control that manipulates that aspect of the sound. All right, so let's go ahead and play what we have so far. Not quite there. Now, one of the things I want to do is turn our attention to the resonance, the filter resonance that is, and just bump this up a bit. Really key feature of synthwave music here. And you'll hear that sort of wah-wah effect. All right, let's loop this again. Let's have it play. I think it could be a little brighter. All right, so don't worry too much about the decay and the sustain of the envelope right now. I'll show you the reason why. For now, we can start off by tweaking these parameters and keep it moving. So the next thing I want to do here is to get a little fancy with our sound. Let's turn our attention to the LFO, or low frequency oscillator. It's not like an oscillator A or oscillator B, or even the sub oscillator, if you will. It's an oscillator that affects a particular parameter. So if I tether it to, let's say, the pan control here of oscillator A, it's in turn doing this, right? Without us having to do this. So let me go ahead and make the link between LFO1 and the pan pot here. And I'm also going to reduce the rate. It's set to quarter notes by default. I want this to oscillate the pan pot from left to right ever so slightly. So I have it set to 2 bars. And as for the amount, I am just going to sort of narrow the sound out. I don't want it to go too far left or too far right. So let's go ahead and play this. You can hear it on the right. Now it's on the left. Right. Left. All right, so not bad. We can always come in here and tweak this as we move along. The same thing I am going to do for our noise generator here. Let's take a look at what this sounds like. I want to use a particular sound. Let's go for the organics and toggle your way to shush 1 right over here. And this is what this sounds like. It's basically white noise. Nothing too special, but I want to add this sound to our original oscillator just to give it a little more sort of grit and attitude. So let's go ahead and make sure that we are routing this noise generator to our filter, and we do that by clicking on the N button over here. And now we have it running through our filter. It's almost providing a little click sound. We can bump up the volume here. All right, let's play our original oscillator. Now I'm going to scale this back. It's a little too loud. Off. On. Okay, pretty subtle. Let's go ahead and continue with the idea of having it pan from left to right. So we'll turn our attention to the LFO number 1 and drive this all the way to the pan pot of our noise generator. And the same thing will occur. It will start toggling from left to right. And the really cool thing about high frequencies is that they're really sort of directional in that the human ear can really hear where high frequencies are coming from. That's why bass signals are very terrifying, especially in nature, because you hear that rumble and it really speaks to the caveman in us. We don't know where it's coming from. Your ears have a hard time detecting where 40, 50, 60 hertz happens to be coming from. Is it coming from the front, left? So that's why we enter that state of panic when we hear, I guess back in the day when you'd hear a large beast stomp through your surroundings. And so we just hear the rumble. So, we have no idea from what direction it's coming from. And so we have that fear. But with high frequencies, you really do know where the sound is located. And that's sort of what we're doing here. We're sort of like titillating the ears of our listeners by having this higher frequency information present in the signal, right? Much easier to detect which side it's coming from now that we have this higher frequency stuff, all right? Okay, so let's keep it moving here. So far, so good. I know it doesn't quite sound as sexy as we want it to get it. We're actually getting there. So let's move on now to some of the effects here, okay? This is a fun part that a lot of people like to dive deep into. So I'm going to start off with an EQ here, right? Let's make sure it's engaged. Now I have an idea of how bright I want this signal to be. I'm adding about 5 dBs of gain here. Might even lower the master just a little bit and try to make that up over here. My channel fader. So I'm boosting everything from, let's say, 770 Hertz upwards. And before that, kind of dark. Okay, I'll even bring this down a notch. Let's say about 4 or maybe 3.5 dBs, okay? Now let's move on to some cooler effects here. Let's move on to a reverb unit here, and I'm going to slide this right after my EQ, so it's brightened first and then it's running through the reverb module. And I pretty much like the reverb from Serum. I think it's really nice, really lush. I like the Hall algorithm. Gonna lower the decay a little. I'm gonna cut out some of that low frequency information. So if you really want to hear what the reverb is doing, let's pay attention to the mix knob here and drive it all the way to wet so we can hear what that reverb sounds like. All right, this is really thinning out the sound. I don't want it that anemic. All right, so here we're cutting off all that frequency, all that high frequency sheen, which is not what we want. We want some top end. There's nothing wrong with that. This is a little too much. So I'll leave it at roughly, let's say 28% here, okay? And I'm going to scale back on the mix knob here, the dry wet knob here. We don't need that much reverb. We're drowning in too much reverb. Okay, so before, pretty much in your face, and now it's a little further back. All right, so we're not done here. Let's add some width to our sound by adding a delay, and the delay I'll place after the reverb. That kind of works because by default it's set to quarter notes, but I actually want the reverb, or delay time rather, to be 1/8 notes. So here we go, we set this up. Let's play this, see what this sounds like. Let me exaggerate this. Okay, not bad. I would make a few adjustments here. I'm going to select the ping pong algorithm, and I'm also going to go in here and alter the delay time between the left and right. And so Serum has this option where you can, slightly increase the delays between the left and right channel. Let me go ahead and crank up the mix knob of our delay module here. I'll even go ahead and disable the reverb so we can pay particular attention to the delay. Right? You really hear that? It's a little overkill. But watch what happens when I nudge this parameter right over here. Now I'm going to scale this back because this is just too much. Sounds a little better. Now, to me, those delays are getting in the way of the original dry stabs here. So what I want to do is manipulate pretty much the EQ of the delays here. There we go. So we've gotten rid of a little bit of low end as well as top end here. So we're not stepping on the toes of that initial wow, so, the dry signal hits and then those delays are heard after. Let me engage the reverb here and see what they sound like together. All right, not bad. I also want to add another effect. Let's go ahead and bring in a chorus. The chorus can stay here at the top. That's absolutely fine. But what I'm going to do with this chorus is set the dry mix knob to 0 here. So it's not being heard, but let's hear what it sounds like just so we get an idea. Very nice, very dreamy, right? So I'm going to set this to 0 right now, as we will be automating this later on in the tutorial, okay? So now that we're done with our effects, you can always go ahead and add some more effects. It shouldn't stop here. Why not go ahead and have fun? But I think this is enough for this application. So let's move on to the matrix here. Now the matrix is a cool place. This is where all of your internal connections are made. You'll find that as you get more into synthesis, you'll make a lot of connections. This is a fairly basic patch here, but in the eventuality when you have too many connections and you get sort of lost, the matrix is definitely a great place to sort of, reference your connections. So what I want to do here is detune our sound a little more. I think we need to sort of add some more synthwaveness, if that's a word, to our sound. And I've given a tutorial on detuning our sounds. I use the LFO from Max for Live, but in this particular tutorial, we are going to use LFO number 2. And I'll show you a different way of doing this. So we are on the matrix pane here, LFO number 2. And in the destination column, we want to make sure that we select global and then master tuning. And this is what we are going to be detuning. Now, LFO number 2, already it defaults to quarter notes. That's not what I want. We're going to be detuning this sound ever so slightly. So I am going to lower this to about 2 bars. And as for the amount, let's see what this sounds like. I'm going to drive the amount here. And that's not usable, right? We've completely ruined any progress we've just made. So let me scale this back. Okay, even at 3, it sounds unusable. So what we can do to compensate here is turn to the output column here and slowly reduce the effect. So it's in essence a sort of dry, wet mix. There we go, starting to sound a little better. There we go. Let's keep this at about 4 or 5. Okay, so this is sort of like the dry, wet knob, if you will. And over here, we have it set to 3. So it is detuning. What we're doing is that we're just nudging it, a little higher than the original pitch. And it stays there for a bit, okay, as outlined by this LFO. And then slowly it makes its way back to baseline, which is somewhere around here. And then it starts to go flat, if you will. So this is a sharp, for those of you who are music theory buffs, we're sort of sharpening, if you will, slightly, and then we're sort of flattening the sound and we're oscillating between, the original pitch, right? And this is a really cool feature that you can automate throughout the arrangement. You don't have to do that. Okay, cool. I think our sound is coming along. Let's play this in context with our sound here. Or let me just engage the bass, because I'm a bass head, so this sounds pretty cool. Nice crunchy bass. All right, we still got a little bit of work to do here. The next thing I would like to do with this patch is let's turn our attention to this pane here. And first of all, let's go ahead and set this in its own enclosure. I click on the Command G button here. And what I want to do is turn our attention to envelope number 2. This is the envelope that is controlling our cutoff filter. So I am going to set this decay and sustain to 0, and I'm going to use the serum macro control here, and I'm going to tether it to the envelope's decay. Might as well go ahead and label this early on, so envelope decay. I'm going to do the same thing with this guy here and tether it to our envelope sustain. Label this envelope sus because he is rather sus. And now I am going to click on this configure button here in Ableton, and I am going to nudge both of these controls and make the connection to macro control number 1. I am going to color this any random color I come across. And now with my MIDI keyboard, let's go ahead and dial in some pretty decent settings. So let's go ahead and do that. I want to do this until I find that I have something very usable. Musical, right? So you can see that these guys here are controlling this guy and this guy is controlling this guy. It's a whole little sort of train here. All right, that sounds pretty good to me. All right, the same thing I want to do for our forgotten chorus here. We haven't forgotten about him, so let's go ahead and get him. We're going to make the link with the third macro control. And again, make sure that this is actually unidirectional. You can always double check this in the matrix, right? So our third macro control is going to the chorus, and you can see we have it set to unidirectional. If you want to make the change here from uni to bidirectional, you can do it here with any of these arrows. All right, let's go back to the effects, and we have it set correctly. And I just want to go ahead and configure this. First, let's go ahead and call this chorus. Click on the configure button. Move this around a bit. And now we have this set to Ableton's macro control. Let's color this, I don't know, pink. And now I can all right. So one of the cool things with tethering some of these knobs to certain parameters, the parameters that really help shift the sound and change the sound throughout our arrangement, is that we can come in here and make some really cool edits. What I can do here is make sure that during certain parts, especially these long held notes, I want the chorus to sort of be heard. So let me go ahead and add some automation breakpoints here and see what this sounds like. Okay, without and with. All right, so we're getting some chorusing at the very end of that phrase. Let me see if I can have it come in a little earlier. That's nice. Maybe a little much. That's nice. Nice and dreamy. All right, so that's with the chorus and without. All right, slight difference. And what I'm going to do here is basically highlight the same envelope here. I'm going to copy, and I'm probably going to paste it somewhere around here. So we have the initial sound followed by the ramping up of the chorus. Cool. So we can follow this sort of, sequence here and add them to the other hits. Right over here. Nope. There we go. And here. All right, so let's play it in context, see what we have going on. Okay, cool. So far so good. You'd obviously have to come in here and make your adjustments so that it sort of grooves with the song. That being said, let's go ahead and bring in an LFO. I just want this thing to pump with our song. Very simple plugin here. I'm also just doing this because I want it to It's very distracting when it's not in sync with what we have going on. I'm going to set the smooth to 1 here. If you guys don't already know that, this is a great way of avoiding clicks and pops. All right, so I think our chorusing can come in, maybe not for this guy here, but for this hit. All right, and we can delay this a little more. You know, this is part of tweaking. All right, so you get the picture. We can come in here and make some more adjustments for our chorus so that it hits a little later, but you can do that on your own time. For the sake of the tutorial, I just wanted to illustrate how important it is to consider adding some of these macro controls, some of these parameters to our macro control, and then we can come in here during our arrangement and make some of these subtle tweaks, especially when you have one motif playing over and over throughout the song. So one cool idea would be to manipulate the decay at one point. So you have something that's more like very sharp. And then gradually you can open this up throughout the piece. And you'll hear this a lot in Synthwave, the way that some producers are able to masterfully manipulate the envelope, the filter envelope, especially when it comes to the decay and the sustain. And, you know, you'll hear one particular sound during their track, and you'll see how it morphs and modulates throughout the entire song. Sometimes they'll layer it with another synth, but generally speaking, they don't just use one sound and stick with it. It's going through a number of changes, and those changes occur from, you know, tweaking these controls like the attack, the decay, the sustain. Really powerful stuff here. All right. So obviously, you know, this is the original version. Has a lot more grit. Let me play it in context. Okay, so I have a number of plugins here. For the sake of this tutorial, there's no need to really go into this. However, if you are interested in seeing the plugins that I'm using to achieve that sound, how I'm able to add some grit and some power behind it, check me out on Patreon. I will be going over this particular tutorial, and we'll dive even deeper. I know some of you are interested in sort of a little more substantive tutorials, and that's where we're going to do some of that stuff. All right. So if you're interested in seeing what kind of plugins I'm using, the settings, and the reason as to why I'm using certain plugins to achieve this sort of like awesome rad sound, you can check the link in the description, and you can sign up to the Patreon. I have a number of tiers there, and as well as a number of tutorials and some really cool things there. And you'll also be supporting the channel. All right. So for the sake of this tutorial, let's do a quick recap here. This is our synth we've just created. We're using some really basic shapes here. We're filtering it through a low pass filter. We're boosting the resonance here just to give that sort of wah-wah sound, which is what, you know, wah-wah pedals of the 70s used to impart. And they did that by boosting the resonance of the filter, and it would just oscillate from the low to the highs. But anyways, and we're also manipulating the envelope here. We have it tethered to the cutoff, and it's just opening and closing every time the note strikes. We also have some cool LFO tricks here. We have it panning on the noise generator as well as oscillator A, so that it's strafing from left to right. And we've taken oscillator 2 and we've linked it to the overall master tuning of the plugin, which I think is really cool. You get that sort of subtle detune effect. Now you can go crazy with that, but we've left it at a really conservative level here. We've added some effects, so feel free to load them up. And last but not least, we've tethered these guys, some of these controls here, to Ableton's macro control here, that you can come in here later on in your arrangement and make some subtle tweaks here. All right, guys. All right, so check out the Synthwave Pro Patreon if you want to see the continuation, I guess, of this tutorial. I'll go over some of the the goodies that I have here, as well as some cool things going on in the overall track, you know, things with the bass. It's a stack of, I think literally 3 basses here and a whole bunch of processing. I had a lot of fun writing this track. Some of you have sent me your tracks, and I absolutely love your Synthwave tracks, and some of them are not even Synthwave, and that's all good. I really appreciate that. But I think what I'm going to do here is turn this into a Patreon tier so that you can send me your tracks and I'll gladly take a good look at it. I'll spend a lot of time stripping your track down and offering some constructive criticism in the form of a video format that I will then send to you. And it will have some cool suggestions as to where we can make some improvements for your song. So for those of you, I think I've reviewed about 7 or 8 by now. So the way it works, I bring it into Ableton, and that's just the stereo file. I don't need your Ableton project. I do not need your Logic source file or anything like that. But I'll attempt to leave you with some notes here and, you know, offer some suggestions in terms of some of the instrumentation you have, some of the arrangement issues, some of the mixing and the drums and how to get them sounding punchier and more synthwave and all that fun stuff. So for the 7 or 8 guys I've done this for, I'm really glad that, you know, you guys were able to send me your music. I absolutely love some of your creation, and I also learn too, right? So it's like a two-way street here. But I think now, a lot more people are doing it. So I figure let's turn this into a Patreon thing and we can offer it to even more people. I think most people didn't even know that this was a thing that I did. If you want to send me your music, you can hit me up at info@synthwavepro.com. And just remember, this is stuff that I do not share on YouTube. I will never share or put your music on YouTube and attempt to criticize it in front of everybody. That's your own personal stuff, and it's also between you and I, and we have that whole confidentiality thing. I wouldn't do that to you. So just know that, you know, I'm keeping this like, you know, between you and I will send the file back to you and you can review the video that I'm sending your way. All right, guys, check out the Patreon. I still have my master classes for those of you who are really hardcore synthwave aspiring producers or already established producers. You know, check out synthwavepro.com, enroll in the courses. And I think with that said, guys, sign up to the YouTube channel if it's your first time here. Really appreciate you hanging out with me today. And hit that bell notification button and you will know exactly when the next tutorial is uploaded. And with that said, guys, stay safe. Bye-bye now.